All right, what's up? Let me get this. Let me get this sound going. Let me get this crazy latency or whatever it's called going. We back with You Do You. This is number 4. Number 4. And today I'm gonna riff some today. I'm talking about living your life, right? Because you only got one. You only got one, and we want to make it the best that we can make it, right? Grabbing my co-host, meet H2O. I probably should. Should quit buying bottled water for the home and get either a filter or the big 5-gallon jug of water. I don't know. It's probably really bad for the environment to buy the 20. No, I think it might be in 40 packs of bottled water. And yeah, probably better for the environment. But for now, it's just what I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go with the bottles and bottles of water. In the news, we got Elon Musk he wants to buy Twitter, the social media platform Twitter. And hope he gets it. Oh, let's check. Let's check. See how fancy can we get? Okay. Let's do a little of this. Getting some Twitter going. Some search. MC search. No. Let's see what we got here. News. So far, he's only made the offer. It might be next week before we know if they're gonna let him buy it. Let's check. check with the AP News. Okay. This is from the AP News. Elon Musk wants to buy Twitter, make it maximally trusted. Now, here's a guy that's living his life. Like, he's doing exactly what he wants to do. Right? So, let's see what it says. In 10 days, Tesla CEO Elon Musk has gone from popular Twitter contributor and critic to the company's largest individual shareholder to a would-be owner of the social platform. A whirlwind of activity that could change the service dramatically, and given the sometimes whimsical billionaires' self-identification as a free speech absolutist. And I agree, it should be 100% free speech. You know, saying, I may not like what you say, but I'll defend your right to say it. Right? And if I don't like what you say, I can just disappear or make them disappear. No, just kidding. Twitter revealed in a securities filing Thursday that Musk has offered to buy the company outright for more than $43 billion with a B dollars, saying the social media platform needs to be transformed as a private company in order to build trust with its users. I believe free speech is a societal imperative for a functioning democracy, Musk said in the filing. I now realize the company will neither drive nor serve this societal imperative in its current form. Later in the day, during an onstage interview at the TED 2022 conference, he went even broader. Having a public platform that is maximally trusted and broadly inclusive is extremely important to the future of civilization. Okay. Since it burst onto the scene in 2006, Twitter has been home to flourishing social and political commentary, shared news, scandal, gossip, cat memes, and dress color arguments. But it has also provided a platform for viral misinformation and lies, bullying and hate speech, and gangs of trolls who can shout down posters they disagree with by unleashing tidal waves of vile images, threats, and similar acts of online aggression. Twitter has devoted a substantial amount of effort to stanching the latter while preserving the former, though not always in ways that satisfy most users. Like other platforms, it has established restrictions on tweets that threaten violence, incite hatred, bully others, and spread misinformation. Such rules drove Twitter's decision to ban former President Donald Trump following the 2021 Capitol insurrection. Twitter has also become a destination for brands and advertisers, many of whom prefer stronger content restrictions and a megaphone for high-profile figures like Trump and Musk, who used it to rally supporters and promote business ventures. Musk, who described Twitter as a de facto town square, detailed some specific potential changes Thursday, like favoring temporary rather than permanent bans, but has mostly described his aim in broad and abstract terms. He said he wanted to open up the black box of artificial intelligence technology driving Twitter's feed so that people would have more transparency, and why some tweets might go viral and others might disappear. I wouldn't personally be in there editing tweets, he said, but you would know if something was done to promote, demote, or otherwise affect a tweet. The billionaire has been a vocal critic of Twitter, mostly over his stated belief that it falls short on free speech principles. The social media platform has angered followers of Trump and other right-wing political figures who have had their accounts suspended for violating its content standards on violence, hate, or harmful misinformation. Musk has described himself as a free speech absolutist, but is also known for blocking other Twitter users who question or disagree with him, which you can do, which you should do. I mean, maybe not necessarily if they disagree, but or question. But if they're doing some foul things, and they need to go. Toot sweet. All right. While Twitter's user base remains much smaller than those of rivals such as Facebook and TikTok, the service is popular with celebrities, world leaders, journalists, and intellectuals. Musk himself has more than 81 million followers, rivaling pop stars such as Lady Gaga. Twitter shares closed at $45.08, down just under 2%, well below Musk's offer of $54.20 per share. That's generally a sign that some investors doubt the deal will go through. The stock remains down from its 52-week high of about $73. Musk called that price his final offer, although he provided no details on financing. Let's see some. The offer is non-binding and subject to financing and other conditions. Now, I don't know. If it were me in this situation, if I was, I guess, on the board of a much aligned company, I would strongly consider selling it. Well, that's just me. Continuing, Twitter said it will decide whether accepting the offer is in its best interest of shareholders. It's unclear, though, just how Twitter's board will react after evaluating the offer. It likely will negotiate seeking a higher price per share, or it may want provisions to ensure that the board remains independent of Musk, said John Coffey, a professor at Columbia University's law school and head of its corporate governance center. The board could adopt poison pill provisions to offer more shares and dilute the value of Musk holdings if Musk's stake grows to 10% or 15%, Coffey said. Even then, Musk could still take over the company with a proxy fight by voting out the current directors. At the TED conference, Musk said he has the money. I could technically afford it, he said to laughs. Excuse me. Should Musk go through with his takeover attempt, he likely could raise the roughly $43 billion he needs, possibly by borrowing billions using his stakes in Tesla and SpaceX as collateral. Most of Musk's fortune, estimated by Forbes to be nearly $265 billion, is tied up in shares of Tesla. The company allows executive officers to use shares as collateral for loans, but limits the borrowing to 25% of the value of the pledged shares. Data provider FactSet says Musk owns 172.6 million shares, worth $176.47 billion. Just over 51% of his stake already is pledged as collateral, according to a Tesla proxy statement. That means Musk could use the remaining stake to borrow about $21.5 billion. He also could borrow on his stake in privately held SpaceX. Musk revealed in regulatory filings over recent weeks that he'd been buying Twitter shares in almost daily batches starting January 31st, ending up with a stake of about 9%. Only Vanguard Group controls more Twitter shares. A lawsuit filed Tuesday in New York federal court alleged Musk illegally delayed disclosing his stake in the social media company so he could buy more shares at lower prices. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission could punish Musk for hurting other investors by taking too long to disclose his buying up of Twitter shares, but it's unlikely that it will do anything to stop a takeover, said Chester Spat, a former SEC chief economist. This is going to play out reasonably quickly, said Spat, now a finance professor at Carnegie Mellon University. Jacob Frankel, a former SEC enforcement attorney now with the Dickinson Wright law firm in Washington. Hold on one second. Is it in Washington? All right, in Washington. Said it is difficult to prove an investor's intent in disclosure cases. The mere fact of the violation around the disclosure does not mean that there was fraud, Frankel said. After Musk announced his stake, Twitter quickly offered him a seat on its board on the condition that he will not own more than 14.9% of the company's outstanding stock. But the company said 5 days later that he declined. The decision coincided with a barrage of now deleted and not always serious tweets from Musk proposing major changes to the company, such as dropping ads, its chief source of revenue, and transforming its San Francisco headquarters into a homeless shelter. The turnabout led CEO Parag Agrawal to warn employees earlier this week that there will be distractions ahead and to tune out the noise and stay focused on the work. Twitter hasn't done as well as its social media rivals and lost money last year. The company reported a net loss of $221 million for 2021, largely tied to the settlement of a lawsuit by shareholders who said the company misled investors about how much its user base was growing and how much users interacted with its platform. Its co-founder Jack Dorsey resigned as CEO in late November and was replaced by Agrawal. I'm not saying I have all the answers here, but I do think that we want to be just very reluctant to delete things and just be very cautious with permanent bans, Musk said. Won't be perfect, he said, but there should be a perception and reality that speech is as free as reasonably possible. So that's from AP News, Michelle Chapman. And that was a little bit earlier today. Okay, well, let's see. Let's see some of Elon Musk tweets. Wait, what should I look for? Elon Musk Twitter. That's not how you spell Twitter. Okay. Maybe we should click this. Let's see what he says. 81.8 million followers. So he's replying to Ali Talal, I don't know. How much of Twitter does the kingdom own, directly and indirectly? Interesting. 2 questions, if I may. Oh, wait. Yeah. What are the kingdom's views on journalistic freedom of speech? So that is in reply to... Let's find out. I don't see. Oh. Here we go. I don't believe that the proposed offer by Elon Musk, $54.20 per share, comes close to the intrinsic value of Twitter, given its growth prospects. Being one of the largest and long-term shareholders of Twitter, Kingdom KHC, and I reject this offer. And that's from Ali Talal at Ali Talal. And then Elon Musk asks those questions. Okay. All right, so yeah. Elon Musk can buy Twitter, and he wants to make it more private, and make it more of a free speech zone. I'll say, yeah, I wonder how much. Wonder how much YouTube is worth outside of Google. Let's find out. Let's see what we can see. It may or may not be find outable. We'll see. Let's see. How much is YouTube worth? So, YouTube. Yes, Google. It's worth. How much is YouTube worth outside of Google? So here we go. Let's see what their revenue was. This is according to Business of Apps. YouTube revenue. Let's see here. Let's find out. Okay. Says YouTube generated 19.7 billion revenue in 2020. How much is Elon Musk trying to buy for Twitter? 40. It's about 43 billion. And YouTube revenue in 2020 is 19.7 billion. Let's see. Okay. So Twitter's Twitter is probably worth more than YouTube, according to this. Let's find another source. YouTube revenue. Search it a different way. Yeah. So this is 2021. Just so far, it's saying it's 28.8 billion. And this is just first quarter. Oh no. That was all last year, 2021. I'm getting my years mixed up. So Twitter, looks like Twitter is worth more than YouTube. If it were me, I would try to buy YouTube. If I could buy YouTube, I would buy YouTube. And I do try to do what Elon Musk is trying to do with Twitter. would make a better YouTube. It would make it, I guess it didn't have to be more competitive, but I mean it would, you probably wouldn't have anybody even trying to compete with it. And you got some companies that are trying to compete with it because it is such a anti-free speech zone. How about that? But hey, it's still a good. It's the biggest platform for, I'd say, for video content creation by individuals. Is that a fair assessment? Let's see here. I think I'm flipped. But we might just keep it as is. Okay. I'll keep it as is for now. All right. So yeah, that's YouTube. That's Elon Musk trying to purchase a Twitter. Okay. So what else do we got? Let's see. So yeah, let's live your life. Probably go through this article here. But yeah, I just wanted to say, like, there is so much to, like, so many obstacles to living the life you want, and they're like just the only obstacles because you don't see them, you don't notice them, you just think, oh, this is an obstacle. How do I get through this obstacle? And now, when you really start to see the obstacles, I mean, when you see there's obstacles, but you don't know that they're obstacles. That's a real obstacle when you don't even know there's an obstacle there. You don't know it's there until you get to it. Wait. So what I'm saying is, there's obstacles there that you think are obstacles. They're actually not obstacles. That's what I'm saying. And once you really see the obstacles, that are not obstacles, you just like keep moving, right? Just keep moving. Just keep swimming. If If you got to swim, let's keep moving. I'm going to go ahead and go over this. Read this. I haven't read it yet, but it seems that it is relevant to this, to you do you. All right, this is from The Guardian. It says, podcast listeners likely to be more curious and less neurotic, study says. Researchers found correlations between podcast listening habits and personality traits. Let's blow this up. All right. People who listen to podcasts are more likely to be curious, more open to experience, and less neurotic on average than non-listeners, a new study suggests. Researchers surveyed 306 people from more than 10 countries on their podcast listening habits, comparing their listening habits with measures of personality. They found that people who reported ever having listened to a podcast scored more highly for openness to experience, interest-based curiosity, and need for cognition, a measure reflecting an individual enjoyment of effortful cognitive endeavors. Podcast listeners were also less likely to score highly for neuroticism, the tendency to experience negative emotions. That's quite different from social media use, said study co-author Dr. Stephanie Tobin, a senior lecturer at the Queensland University of Technology. There's a positive association between neuroticism and using social media, she said. Of podcast listeners, those who scored more highly on the trait of agreeableness were more likely to report forming parasocial relationships with their favorite podcast hosts. Parasocial, let's check that out. That's a new term for me. And we'll come back to the article. Oh, so we'll come back to the parasocial. Let's finish the article. That's a whole nother article. All right, parasocial relationships were associated with listening for longer and listening to podcasts by known hosts, the study authors found. That's interesting. Listening for longer. This is a long form podcast. Thank you for listening. And if you're having some value from this, we'd appreciate it if you give the video a like, subscribe if you want more. Thanks. All right. The more you listen, the more you socially engage and feel like the favorite host is a friend. Me, your friend. Silent Thriller, aka Madvillainy, Tobin said, adding that this association seemed to have positive outcomes. Now, that's interesting, because if you listen to a podcast regularly, you do feel like you know the person relatively well. I mean, as well as you can know them, just by virtually seeing them and listening to them on a regular basis. And yeah, seemed like they would become a friend by proxy. Okay. Positive outcomes, it says. So feeling like the podcast host was your friend was related to feeling generally more connected with other people, she said. Previous research has shown that the method of podcast listening can affect perceived intimacy. Perceived intimacy. Finding that people felt more empathic and persuadable when hearing podcasts through headphones compared to through speakers. Finding that people felt more empathic and persuadable when hearing podcasts through headphones compared to through speakers. Okay. All right, let's press on. The study participants ranged in age from 18 to 64, with average age of 27.9. Of the respondents, 78% reported being podcast listeners. The most popular podcast categories were comedy, 48%, games and hobbies, 34%, society and culture, 23%, music, 23%, and news and politics, 23%. Fewer than half of listeners engaged with podcasts less than monthly, while 30% listened weekly and 12.5% were daily listeners. This is a podcast. The You Do You podcast is a podcast that I'm really trying to do daily, every weekday, 5 days a week. And as we grow, probably be more than that. It's part of growth. If you're not growing, I don't know where I was going with that. But if you're not growing, you're not growing. If you're not growing, you're staying the same. You really want to stay the same. Don't you want to grow? Don't you want to know more? All right. Podcast listening was negatively correlated with the need to belong, which Tobin said was an unexpected finding. Negatively correlated with the need to belong. In the past, the need to belong has been related to some aspects of social media use and parasocial relationships with other kinds of media figures. Previous research has found that people who score highly for the trait report more addictive social media habits. The researchers emphasized that while certain personality traits were correlated with podcast listening, they could not establish causal links. They did not study whether the frequency of listening or preference for podcast types were associated with different traits, or whether podcast listeners were also radio listeners. So this podcast listener is not really a radio listener. That's just me. But you do you. You do you. And let's see where we're at. Another limitation of the study was that it relied on self-reports of listening habits. Sabina Kleitman, an associate professor at the University of Sydney who was not involved in the study, said the research was well designed, but said replication of the results in more detailed analysis by podcast type, for example, was needed. The pattern of correlations also reveals that none of the personality variables shared any relationship with hours spent listening to podcasts. She said the study was published in the journal PLOS One. And looks like that's the end of the article. Ooh. Okay, parasocial relationships. Paranormal relationships. What's a paranormal relationship? That would be a relationship with the paranormal, which means you have a relationship with a ghost, like Casper, or is it Casper? Wasn't there another like friendly ghost? I know Casper was a friendly ghost. Wasn't there another one? Let me know down in the comments. Was there another friendly ghost in your childhood? All right. Never mind, I got sidetracked. By the way, I also ate way too much today. Not like big food, but a lot of small food. And that's still not good. So I got to get better at that. I got to get better at not eating. Yeah, I definitely got to get better at not eating. I used to be pretty good at it, but I got to get back on it. I try to drink so much water. And so should everyone. Tragic but true how podcasters replaced our friends. That I can say is a certainty. Because I definitely replace friends with podcasters. May or may not be a good thing. I think it could be good because you just might not have a lot of people that you relate to in your corporeal, your everyday life. So podcasting or, listening to podcasters could have that replacement. All right. Let's see what this is. All right, bear with me. Okay, this is ridiculous. All right, here we go. Tragic but true. How podcasters replaced our friends. The pandemic has seen audio shows fill a hole in our lives, providing companionship that is increasingly difficult to distinguish from the real thing. This is still The Guardian, and this is by Rachel Aresti. Some of my friends have no idea I even exist. These are people I know intimately, extensively, profoundly. I know what they had for dinner last night, the petty arguments they have had at home, their obsessions, their insecurities, their fears, what time they wake up in the morning. I wake up around 4:30 in the morning because I developed the habit of working out. I think it's a good habit. And I encourage you to develop that habit too. It can help with a lot of things. Anyway, moving forward, let's press on. No piece of minutiae is too minute. No idle thought too inconsequential. No detail too mundane. I want to hear it all. If this is beginning to sound slightly alarming, I should point out that they tell me all of these things and try to make me laugh in the process. I think of podcasters as my friends, and I am not alone. Initially, I thought I might be. I have always taken pop culture to heart in an excessive way, much to the bemusement of those around me. But to my relief, my actual friends seem to feel the same way about the podcasts they listen to. Karen and Georgia from My Favorite Murder are my friends. Says one when I broach the subject over text. Yes, they're my mates. They're my mates. They're my mates. Confirms my brother of the presenters of his beloved Tiny Meat Gang podcast, while a colleague says the hosts of Trash Future have felt my pals for a while now. Seems to be. Hold one moment. Gonna try to fix something here. Nope, that did not work. All right, back to the show. And while a colleague says that the host of, okay, yeah, that's where I left off. All right. The pandemic has no doubt expedited the podcaster friend trend. After a brief dip in listener numbers during the first lockdown, something attributed to the change in people's daily routines, particularly the absence of a commute. Audience figures leapt up again. In December, BBC Sounds reported a 21% increase in podcast listening over the year. The number of podcasts also ballooned, filling voids in the professional lives of the hosts and the social lives of the listeners, and in some cases replacing both. There were periods during the lockdown where I was hearing more from certain podcasters than anywhere else on earth, even the people I was sharing a home with. How about that? Let's see here. Oh. Okay. All right. But believing that people you encounter through the media are your friends is not a new phenomenon. It is called parasocial interaction, a term coined by sociologists Donald Horton and Richard Wohl in 1956. Obviously, they did not have podcasts in mind, but everything about the form seems perfectly pitched for such a relationship to blossom. Podcasts are intimate with no in the room audience to remind you of your own distance. They can also be very long and very long running, which means masses of information about the podcaster can be communicated in a network of in jokes and callbacks established. They are often collaborative, fueled in part by listener correspondence. There are a lot of them, and the bar to entry is far lower than for other forms of media. Everyone could be a podcaster. Sometimes it feels as though they are. That means you are not only more likely to find a podcaster who shares your outlook and sense of humor, but also one who shares the material reality of your life. In other words, someone who might truly be your friend. But can you really get to know someone just by listening to their podcast? Surely all broadcasters are putting on an act. For us, it isn't a performance, says John Robbins, a co-host of the Ellis James and John Robbins show, and one of my best pretend friends. Because I'm with Ellis and he's with me, the pair are, he says, two men who are really good friends and who love each other. I think that's what has made it strike a chord with people. This deep bond isn't just a mechanism of the show, something that allows the duo to be very authentic in their conversations. It is also its primary subject and animating principle. Like the hosts of many other podcasts, the pair invite the listener to learn how their dynamic functions, preparing them for the glorious day when they become part of it. This is a really long article. Not really, though. We're almost done with it. This kind of vicarious friendship is something Robbins is well acquainted with, to the extent that it has become an active consideration when making his own shows. I totally got that feeling the first time that I listened to a podcast. I think I even sent Adam and Joe a soppy email at one point, just as a fan. So when I went into it with Ellis, I knew what the relationship was like. We've always been quite conscious of looking after our listeners and creating a community around the show. That sense of community was much needed during the pandemic, but the shared experience of lockdown has benefited podcasts. As lifestyles converged, opportunities dwindled for everyone. Hosts became more relatable than ever. For Alice, who is 29 and works in PR, podcasters, in particular, the Sentimental in the City hosts Dolly Alderton and Caroline O'Donoghue, served as replacement friends during lockdown. They also simulated the causal intimacy of the colleague experience. Like The Office, podcasts allow you to form strong connections based on day-to-day stuff, but it's not a deep and meaningful relationship, Alice says. excuse me, heartburn. The pandemic also meant that most friendships were conducted exclusively through technology, blurring the lines between podcasters and acquaintances even further. We're all starved of information, says 32-year-old Steph, who counts the Nobody Panic hosts Tessa Coates and Stevie Martin among her podcast pals. A story you've heard from a friend and a story you've heard via a podcast are coming in via the same medium, which is disembodied voice on your phone. In a lot of ways, one isn't any more real than the other. To blame the pandemic entirely for my own delusions would be unfair. In fact, thinking I am friends with podcasters is something I have done since I was a teenager. Thanks for the good times, Adam and Joe. What hadn't occurred to me was that my parasocial tendencies might betray questionable personality traits. Robbins points out that podcasts provide friendship on your terms and, crucially, at your own convenience. Steph describes it as a lazy, selfish version of socializing. I can see that. I don't know why this keeps blanking out. Give me a moment. Oh. It's a little better. Okay. Where was I? Podcasts also allow for companionship that is free of chaos and confusion, ideal for control freaks like me or you. Yet, sometimes podcast friends aren't merely user-friendly substitutes. They can fill real voids in your life. Part of the reason I am such a huge fan of Rob Beckett and Josh Whitcomb's Lockdown Parenting Hell is because none of my friends have children. So listening to the pair's candid complaints feels reassuring and cathartic. Similarly, when nobody you know in real life shares your niche interest, some podcast somewhere will provide someone who does. But even when they serve no discernible purpose, these fake friendships still bring much to my life: comedy, camaraderie, comfort, an expanded universe. As lockdown lifts, I have no intention of weaning myself off of them, but I am also looking forward to reacquainting myself with real friendships, ones that are messier, more inconvenient, and actually far less self-serving, even if they give me the opportunity to talk about myself for a change. So that gives us more of an insight on parasocial relationships. And how podcasting can foster parasocial relationships. Man, I gotta stay off the tacos. It's Heartburn City. So I want to share one of the podcasts that I've found interesting over the years. I don't listen to it a lot, but when I do listen to it, it's quite insightful on the way media was in the mid 20th century, or maybe even early to mid 20th century. Yes. Okay. So Relic Radio. I don't know if it's, I think this is real radio from the mid 20th century. Kind of like the original Twilight Zone. Let's see. Let's see how we're doing on time. Oh yeah, we're good on time. Near. Beauty. All right. Let's check this out. The Outer Limit by Dimension X. No, wait. Do we want to do that one? I don't know. All of these are new to me. There was one I was listening to a few weeks ago. I don't remember which one it was, but it was Relic Radio. No, let's listen to The Outer Limit. See what we can see.
Relic Radio.
This is Relic Radio Sci-Fi, old-time radio, science fiction stories from relicradio.com.
Adventures in time and space, told in future tense. Dimension X! Can you predict what will come in 100 years? Or in 10? Or in the next minute? Some people think they can. Nuclear scientists, mathematicians, astronomers, biologists. They'll predict the shape of the future. Why? Because they make the future. Because they see beyond the known dimensions of time and space into the unknown, Dimension X. We go ahead now in time to 1965. We're on a vast concrete runway set in the desert of the Southwest. A giant metal ship stands before us, prow pointed for the stars. And in 5 minutes, the signal will flash, and it will tear up through the atmosphere to the outer limit.
Attention. Clear field for takeoff. Clear field.
5 minutes, Steve.
For takeoff.
Wire up, Charlie.
I want to go over procedure again, Steve.
Don't worry, I got it straight.
You just make sure.
Okay. I take her up on jets to 50,000, then I cut in the rockets.
No lower, or your tail blast will burn out 3 counties.
I climb 4 minutes on rockets, then start maneuver tests.
Remember that, no more than 4 minutes.
Right.
This ship isn't like those strato-rockets you've been testing. She's the first one built for outer space. If she works, she can go clear to the moon.
If I'd have known that, I'd have brought my toothbrush.
Well, not this trip. Now get this, Steve. You've got power there to clear the Earth's gravitational field. But remember, after you cut in the rockets, you've only got 10 minutes fuel. If you go beyond the outer limit and don't save fuel for the return...
I know, I won't get down again.
That's right, Steve. You'll drift off into space. Get that now. 10 minutes fuel.
Gotcha.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, this project is a lot more important than that cosmic ray bomb they're testing out in the Pacific tonight.
Well, the Security Commission brass doesn't think so. I don't see any undersecretaries under anything.
Don't worry. In the long run, our ship will make the CR bomb back-page stuff. But in the meantime, it's just as dangerous. Remember, half the principles in this ship are pure theory, Steve. Slide rule stuff. If anything goes wrong, we may have to scrape you off the landscape with a soup spoon.
Anyway, I'm not gonna play the whole thing, but you get the idea. That's Relic Radio. Should be able to find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Your favorite podcast medium? Yeah. Relic Radio, sci-fi, old time radio. So yeah, these are real. This was real radio from like the 50s, and it's cool to listen to. It's kind of like the Twilight Zone, like an audio version of Twilight Zone. But yeah, and check it out. It's pretty cool. If you're into, old-timey radio, science fiction. But we did it. We have made it through another episode of You Do You. I'm going to go ahead and close it down for this one. We're going to try to make it back Monday, the 18th. The dreaded tax day. I know I gotta finish my taxes. I hope you finished yours. Y'all probably smart. Y'all probably got it done already. Anyway, this is the You Do You podcast. Like, subscribe. Check out the description box for more info. And remember, this episode was, the Live Your Life episode. So remember, and we're going to go more deeper into it in future episodes. This is just a taste. But yeah, I think part of living your life is learning more than what the status quo may be. Status quo is only, sometimes the status quo, you don't even get to the surface. But when you break through that status quo, and you start to learn so much more, you can achieve so much more. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for putting up with me, my antics. And we'll catch you next time.